Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's meetup. On today's agenda, we'll be showing a sneak peek of the new addressing maps and apps. So as a reminder, we are recording this meetup and we'll be posting it to the meetup.com groups we have. And it usually gets posted about a week or so after the particular meetup date. So during the meetup, if you would like to ask questions, there's a Q&A panel at the bottom of your Zoom screen there. So go ahead and submit questions there. We'll try to answer them in several periods throughout the meetup. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Scott and get us started.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to share with you the progress we've been making on the new address solutions. I want to just take a minute to welcome you to the meetup and thank you for all your participation this year. Today we're going to talk about the new address solutions we've been working on, and we want to give you a sneak peek of the new offerings we'll be delivering early in 2020. I'm going to spend a few minutes this first, just setting some context for these solutions and the work we've been doing, and then turn it over to Chris and Mike, and they're going to really show you the new offerings that we'll be shipping early next year. Ultimately, we want to use this meetup to get your feedback and also to give you a chance to kind of understand what will be coming in the new address solutions. Probably the most important question that many of you may be asking is, when will we be seeing these? And I wanted to hit that right away. Our plan is to ship the new solutions we're showing you today with ArcGIS Pro 2.5, which at this point looks like will be sometime in late January. So everything we're going to show you today will be available then with the Pro 2.5 release, and we'll be growing and evolving the offerings based on your feedback and subsequent releases. So today we're going to talk about our addressing solutions, and they're really focused on key workflows at the state and local level. And as everyone on this meetup probably understands already, the addresses are one of the most fundamental and essential layers at a local level and used in many workflows at the state level as well. And we've been trying to think about how we can help you manage authoritative repositories of addresses for a whole variety of needs. 911, which has obviously been a hot topic with Nina's work on the next gen 911 guidelines. But addresses are used throughout local government in permitting workflows, assessment notices, and tax bills. They're fundamental to elections and where you vote in many places, and ultimately in many of the water and sewer billing and other types of transactions that require government agencies to deliver services or ultimately get information to constituents within the community. And as we've developed these solutions, we really wanted to tackle some key business challenges we heard. And ultimately, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, addresses are used throughout government agencies, and we wanted to ensure that you had the tools to help develop a flexible repository that could be used for 911 purposes, it could be used for permitting and other workflows, and ultimately this repository and a standard set of locators could be used to integrate with systems all over your government agency. We know that address data is never perfect, so we also wanted to provide a set of solution offerings that help you continuously improve the quality of that address data, to leverage feedback from the many consumers of this information so you can continuously improve the content, and in some cases even take address data out in the field and validate it through a canvas or through more direct field verification workflows. And finally, one of the other kind of big pieces of this solution offering is that we know that address information needs to be shared with other organizations. If you're a county, you may be aggregating address information from authoritative authoritative repositories at the city level. If you're a state agency or a regional agency, you may be aggregating data from county address repositories. And so we wanted to make sure you had tools that would allow you to aggregate that information and share it with the different stakeholders that need that. So we've had addressing solutions for state and local governments for many, many years now. It's actually one of our more popular set of solution offerings. And this slide really shows kind of the transition from our current offerings to the new solutions that we will be shipping in January. One of the big things we've been working on is the migration of our current ArcMap-based address data management solution to the new ArcGIS Pro-based workflows that Chris is going to show you today. As we've done that, we've incorporated the data checks that we had in Data Reviewer for addresses, and you can use those to extend your data management workflows. We've taken the address crowdsourcing and address field verification solutions that currently exist and actually encapsulated it into a new solution offering we call address field operations that'll have 3 distinct information products. The first is address crowdsourcing, which Mike will talk more about. Address assignments, which allows you to kind of triage the information coming in from different stakeholders and assign it to maybe field activities. And then ultimately the field inventory solution, which allows you to then go out and verify that information or collect new address information. To complement the new solution offerings we're going to ship in January, you'll also see that community addresses is still available and can be used in concert with these new solution offerings to aggregate your authoritative address information. Now, it wouldn't be a good address conversation without talking about the layers that really drive this solution offering. And today you're going to see Chris and Mike interacting with some kind of foundational address information that's provided with the solution. Ultimately, what we've done is taken the address layers that we had in our current solution and provided us some key updates to account for the work that's been ongoing at the national level on some of these guidelines. And so what you'll see are some new revised layers that are delivered with the solution offering that help you manage road centerlines and related road name aliases, help you inventory and maintain a master street name inventory for your community, and then a set of features that help you manage site addresses. And you'll see address points, site addresses, and ultimately entrance points as well too. And the layers also allow you to manage then 1 or more related postal addresses to any given site address. So real quickly, if I were to bounce out, what you'll get with the solution is a data dictionary that really defines all of the layers that are included in the solution. And if I were to just kind of click on the site address point here, you'll see that this layer is very similar to what we had previously, but we have updated it, as I mentioned, to account for many of the mandatory and even recommended fields that you find in some of the new NENA guidelines that have been put forth. And so if I really were to summarize the work we've done on these layers, what we've done is really taken the existing solution, the existing layers that are in our current solution, we've modernized them to account for those new next-gen 911 content requirements. And ultimately what this will allow you to do is publish your address content that you manage with our solutions in a next-gen 911 format if you so need to. So without further ado, and with that context in mind, what we really want to do is spend most of our time today just showing you these new solution offerings that will be available early next year. So with that, Chris, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Scott. Okay, so first I want to start with address data management, which is that configuration of ArcGIS Pro that allows you to manage your address information. What you'll get with this solution is an ArcGIS Pro project, which will come with some toolboxes that have some geoprocessing tools to enhance the editing experience. You'll get 2 file geodatabases, a schema-only geodatabase that has the layers that support the data model and the rules, the attribute rules that are configured to automate some of the editing workflows. And we're also going to provide a sample database that the layers will initially point to so that you can test out the workflows and really understand how the tasks and the tools come together. We also provide a task that walks you through the common workflows with managing your address and road center lines. And it also comes with some data reviewer checks that I'll show you in a little bit that can help you further improve the integrity of your address information. So the first step in the process when you deploy this solution is you'll open the ArcGIS Pro project and you'll want to start with the task. And it starts by first providing you some background information about what you get with the address data management solution and what are some of the benefits of it. And so Scott talked about a lot of these, the layers that take and incorporate many of the content standards from national guidelines. You get a set of tasks that walk you through the processes that are associated with it. We've configured attribute rules. So if you're new to attribute rules, they're rules that you can write on layers and tables in a database, and they respond to editing events. And I'll show you some of those as I walk through the workflows. But it's kind of replicating the behavior that we had previously in our attribute assistant add-in in ArcMap. But now we're running at the database tier, and there's lots of advantages for that. And then it comes pre-configured with some data reviewer checks, as I mentioned. So once I've reviewed that information, let's go ahead and jump into some of the workflows that you're going to use as part of this solution. So the first thing you might want to do if you are, for example, adding a new development in is add a new road to your road center lines. And very similar to the way we handle this in the ArcMap solution, we provide this master street name index. This is a table in my project, in my database, that has the unique list of roads that are in my community. And this is kind of the master table of all the roads that exist that I'm responsible for. And I'll show you some of the benefits of this, but this is really to help keep the integrity of your address information solid on good footing. So if I need to add a new road, the first thing I'm going to do is click and add a new road. So let's say that I want to add West Elm Street. And so the domains are populating some of the options. When I click off, what you can see is the full road name was automatically calculated by concatenating the different options. So this was an attribute rule that fired in the table to calculate that full road name. I'm also going to specify the city that it falls in. So if you're working in a county and your different municipalities, this would be important attribute information on that road. And this one I'll set as a pending street for now. Okay, so the next step, what we need to do is the way we're going to enforce integrity on our roads and our site addresses is we're applying a domain for the road name on those features. And that domain is going to be populated or calculated from this master street names table. So we provide a tool that allows you to update the domain in the database based on the road names that are in your master street name table. So when you run this tool, it updates that domain. So when I add a new road, I can find that West Elm Street. Now let's go ahead and add the new road. One of the challenges that we have with managing our road center lines is maintaining the integrity of the address ranges along the roadway. So if I look at this North Mill Street, you can see right now it has a left from of 1001 and a left to from 1041. And I have a right from 1004 to a right to of 1060. When I draw in this new road, I'm actually going to snap to North Mill Street and digitize in the direction of ascending addresses for the new road. And what actually happens when I create that road is it splits North Mill Street at that location, and it prorates the address ranges. So you can see now that the left from for this segment north of my new road is now 1033 to 1041 and 1048 to 1060. And you can see the original street now stops short at 1031 and 1046. So it's interpolating the break based on the location of that line and splitting it and prorating the ranges for me. I could always go in and modify these after the fact, but it helps automate that process a little bit. So the next step, I want to update some characteristics of the new road I just added. So first I'm going to populate some address ranges for that street. So I'm going to say this is 101 to 199 and 100 to 198. And now I'm going to pick from my domain of road names. I'm going to find the West Elm Street that's now in my domain and apply that. I'm also going to specify the municipality on the left and the right. These are all things that you could default by specifying it in your feature template when you create the feature. So these could be customized to meet your needs. If you're always working in the same state and always in the same county, it could make sense to set those as defaults in your feature templates. So I'm going to apply that. The final step with roads is I can add one or more road name aliases. So for example, this is different from county or state designations, but sometimes roads have vanity names along portions of the segment. We might just want to maintain those aliases. And the way I can do that is through a relationship. I'm going to right click and say add new to relationship. And now I can add a road name alias to that Elm Street, and I'm associating it with the segment. And oftentimes the road name may stay the same across an intersection, but on one side of the street it has a different alias than the other. So that's where we're maintaining it, is off of a relationship on the segment. I'm just going to delete this, and I'm going to go ahead and save my edits. Okay. So we've added a new road name. Next, I need to create some site addresses off that new Elm Street road. So what we provide in this task is a couple feature templates. This is a little different from the ArcMap experience, if you're familiar with that. What we're going to do is construct a site address on either the left or the right side, and we provide two templates depending on the side of the road that you want to construct the site address. As part of the task, I turned on the road direction because it's important to know what is the right side or the left side of the road. So on the left side, let's go ahead and construct some points. So what I'm going to do is specify the distance from the road I want to offset my site address. So I'm going to specify I want it 60 feet off the left side of the road. And then I'm going to click along the road where I want that address to be created. This is typically the driveway location or the curb cut that I'm addressing from. So when I click along the roadway, it creates a site address point for me. And these are pending site addresses. And you can see that this site address got an address number of 131, and this one got a site address of 177. So based on the address range of the road, the side of the road, and how far along I constructed the address point, it gave me a proposed address number for that site address. I can always modify these as well, and I can move these site address points, but this is helping me to quickly give me a good estimate of what that address number would be based on where it falls along the roadway. There's also some other things I can do. So for example, let's go to the right side of the road, and I'm still going to construct them 60 feet off the road. But this time I want to create multiple site addresses along the roadway. So I'm using this feature construction tool called Create Points Along the Line. And I can do a couple things. I can specify the number of points that I want to place, or I could specify I want to place a point every so many feet along the road. In this case, I'm going to just create 5 points evenly spaced out along the roadway and hit create. And this time it creates me 5 address points and a related 5 site address points, each with their own unique address number based on their distance along the roadway. So with that tool, it allows us to rapidly create a lot of site addresses using out-of-the-box construction tools in ArcGIS Pro. Let's talk about some other situations. Maybe we are creating addresses for a commercial development. So let's say, for example, I want to create, I'm going to create on the 100 feet, and I want to create 5 site address points, and I want to increment each address number by 2. So now if, for example, I want to create it off of Mill Street for this location here, if I click along the roadway, it's going to create me 5 stacked site addresses, all with a unique address number, incrementing by 2. So this would allow me to quickly create those 5 address points for each commercial unit And I could move these addresses along this building footprint to their correct locations. Another scenario is, let's say it's an apartment or a condominium. Let's say they all have the same address number. I'm going to create 15 at that location. So now I have 15 stacked points. And I want to go ahead and update the floor and the unit number for those. So I'm going to go to the next step. And in this case, I'm going to update the attributes. So the task automatically selected all the features that were just created for me. Let's take a look at first some things that we can automate as part of this attribute update process. Because I've selected them all, I can click the layer here and I can update the attribute for all the selected features in one go. So I could update the city for all the points. I can update the state and the county just by selecting this layer. Now let's take a look at all the ones that are off of Mill Street. So I'm going to select all of these. They all have the same address number, which is good, but they're in a specific building. So I'm going to specify that in the address unit type. So I'm going to say this is in building 1 and hit apply. So the address updated, the full address. This is being calculated from an attribute rule as well. Now let's take 5 of these site addresses, and these are on floor 1 and hit apply. So those got applied. Now let's take 5 more and say that these are on floor 2. And my last 5 are on floor 3. Hit apply. So now I have 5 site address points on floor 1, floor 2, and floor 3. I could then even go in and at the next level specify what unit this is. So this is unit 1. And then I might have unit 2. And there's some ways that you could further automate this process. There's ways that you can calculate a sequential number. So you could specify unit for all of them and then calculate a sequential number for all the units from 1 through X, or starting at whatever number, incrementing by whatever number. But this is a way that you can begin to manage multiple site address points for multiple units in a condominium or an apartment. And the full address is going to continue to calculate as you populate these alternate or these address unit types and numbers and alternates 1 through 4. Okay, so we've added some site address points. The next step, what we can do is we can move our addresses around. So I might, for example, just based on the placement, I might decide I want to move this one slightly to here. Now I'm going to move this point a little bit over. For the ones that are stacked, maybe that's fine, or maybe I want to pull them out and have a little bit more precise location. You have complete control over on the placement because you can always move them or modify them after they're created. Next, we're going to add a postal address. So let's take this address point. I'm going to select it, expand. I can see its related address point, the location that it was, the address number was calculated from. For postal addresses, I can right click and say add new to relationship. And now I can begin to add some of the address, the postal address information. So this is taking into account some of the postal standards that are out there. So you don't have to worry about what that schema is. You can begin to start entering it. For owner occupant, I can also specify whether this person is the owner and the occupant, or they could be the owner and have a different postal address than the address of the location, or they could be a renter and be the occupant. So you can manage multiple postal addresses associated with the site address point. And then the final step is to add a building entrance point. So sometimes you may want to, for example, in larger cities, the address may be addressed off of one road, but the driveway entrance may be off of another road. Or you may want to be more explicit about the driveway is in one location, but the building entrance is actually on another side of the building. And this is how we can add those points and associate them with the site address point. So I'm going to select my building entrance template. I'm going to create it on this side of the building. And then using the select tool, I'm going to shift select. So I select both features. I'm going to open my attributes. And then I'm going to expand, right click on my entrance point and say add selected to relationship. So now I have my site address point. I have my related address point that the address number was calculated from. I have my related building entrance, and then I have my related postal address. So all of these things are associated with that site address point and managed through that relationship. Okay, so let me zoom out a little bit back to this area. So I'm going to save my edits. I've completed and added my site address points and all the related information as I want to manage. And now let's say this proposed development has actually been finalized, but we've actually modified the name of the road. So instead of West Elm Street, we've decided it's actually going to be West Oak Street. So I'm going to enter. It updates the full road name. It also updated the street name, the related road name, and all of the site address points. So now all the site addresses are Oak Street instead of Elm Street. In that process, we also are going to want to run that tool to update that road name index so that the domain is updated to reflect the latest values in the master street name table. So I'm going to run that tool, and now everything is good. The domain's valid, and that Oak Street is now a valid value to select. Some additional tools that we provide in the solution are the ability to flip the road direction and swap the parity, because road direction is important. We're assuming that the addresses are going to go up in value based on the road direction, and it's also how we decide what is the right side and the left side of the road. So using this task, you can select one or more roads and flip their direction. You can also swap their parity. So if you want to, for example, swap what are the right side address ranges and the left side address ranges, you can do that as part of this tool. We have a tool that can help create road intersections. So this is often important in geocoding and other workflows to know what the cross streets of an intersection are. So you can select one or more roads, and you'll get an intersection point created with a field containing a comma delimited list of the roads that intersect that point. Finally, I want to talk about data reviewer that's also included with the solution. So by validating my address data, what I can find is a set of data reviewer checks that come with the project. So if I zoom out a little bit, and on the Edit tab, I go to Manage Quality. I have a set of rules that I can run. When I run them, it's going to, actually it'll run on my selection set, so I won't get any errors because I had a feature selected there. But if I remove my selection, it's going to run based on what's in the visible extent of my map. And if I had a selection set, it would only process the selection. It found 2 validation errors. One thing I like to do as part of this process is I like to symbolize the errors. So if I click this symbolize button, it will show me on the map the errors that it found. So you can see there, it's saying there's an error with one of the road center lines and one of the address points. So if we look at this road center line, it's saying that the right address range is invalid. So let's take a look at that center line. What you can see for the right addresses is the right from and the right to are the same number. And this check is ensuring that the from right and the from to aren't 0 or null, and that the from right is less than the to right. So I can go ahead and update this. Let's repair it and say it should be 501 to 541 and apply that. And then I can, for this check, update the results. I'm going to say that it's resolved and I fixed the address range and hit apply. So now that feature has turned green. It's all good. Let's take a look at the site address point. This one's saying that the site address is not within 500 feet of the related road. So this is a spatial check. What it's seeing is it's buffering this site address point, and it's seeing if there's any road that's within 500 feet that matches the road name that's specified by this feature. So this site address says it's North Mill Street, and Mill Street's over here. And so it's greater than 500 feet. But for me, that's still okay. This is a valid site address point, so I'm going to mark this as an exception. This rule is attempting to find site addresses that maybe have the wrong address, may have the wrong road name associated with them. So it does find a lot of those errors, but it may find things that aren't errors. But it's easy enough to mark it as an exception. So I'm going to update the results, say that this is an exception, say has a valid road name, and hit apply. So now it's green. If I run checks in the future, this one won't be found as an error because I marked it as an exception. So I don't have to worry about it going forward. But this is a nice spatial check to ensure that your site addresses are properly addressed and associated with the right road name. So I'm going to close out a data reviewer. Finish that. So those are the key workflows that come with address data management. Once you've gone through those workflows, what we also provide are a set of tasks that walk you through. Now that you've seen what it can do, you're probably going to want to use it with your own data. So we walk you through some steps to allow you to review that data dictionary that Scott showed earlier. Define the spatial reference on the sample geodatabase to be your local spatial reference. You can then configure the maps, layers, and rules. So update the data sources in the maps to point to your new geodatabase, add any new fields or update domains based on your needs, configure the attribute rules that come with the solution, update the feature templates that are creating features, and all the unique things that you might need to configure it to make your own experience. You're going to then load your data into the address layers if you already have it. And we're leveraging the Append tool and walk you through loading your content into the layers. If you want to use this in ArcGIS Enterprise, you can then copy those feature classes and tables into your enterprise database. And because you've already configured them, you've configured the rules, and you've loaded your content, it's really as simple as just copying it into your enterprise and then updating the data sources on the layers to point to your enterprise feature classes. And the last step is if you want to configure additional reviewer checks, you can do that here from the reviewer rules. So in this section, I can update any reviewer rules that I want to run as part of my checks. I want to spend a little bit of time showing you some of the attribute rules because I think that is going to be a new feature for a lot of people. And I want to highlight how you can get to those and begin to modify and manage them. So for example, if we take a look at that master street name table, I can go to design and attribute rules. So this table has two rules. The first is to calculate the full road name. So this rule is what runs when I update fields in that master street name table to calculate that full road name. So it's concatenating the different pre-direction, pre-type, road name, road type, road post direction, all those fields. It's concatenating them into a single value and returning it and populating the full road name. This rule is run when I have an update to my full road name. it goes out and finds all the related site address points and all the related center lines, and then updates those features with the new road name. So there's different levels of complexity in some of these rules, but we really wanted to try and encapsulate all those common workflows and take care of those in these editing rules, so you don't have to worry about it. You just enter the values, the rules fire, and you get the result that you expect. All right, with that, I think I'll hand it over to Mike to take a look at the address field operations solutions.
Hey, Chris, before we do that, let's maybe take a few minutes to answer some questions that have come in on the data management solution. Matt, do you want me to, I can walk through these if you want and just kind of hit them.
Sure.
So the first one we had, Chris, which is a pretty easy one, someone asked, what about the ArcMap desktop user? And I guess what I would say to that is we have an existing solution for ArcMap users. That solution will be moved to mature support when we release the ArcGIS Pro version, but you can continue to use it if you are not still an ArcMap user until ArcMap no longer is supported. The next question we had, Chris, maybe is you can talk, or I can talk a little bit about what's the relationship between the address entrance points and the address site point, the site address points that you placed. You kind of showed this at the end of your site address workflow, but maybe just highlight what are some of the key, like what's the relationship between the two?
Yeah, so a site address point can be associated with one or more entrance points. So the site address point is what you'll use in, a lot of your publication of your address information. So that's the location that you might geocode based on or route based on and things like that. But the entrance points are just further information and metadata about how you might access that address. You might have a driveway that's off of one street, but the address and the full road name associated with that site address point are off of a different street. So you want to have a clear information about where the driveway is. Or it might be a large complex or building that has multiple building entrances associated with the same entrance. So we're just associating and tying those to the site address point to give us further details about how I might access that address.
And if I clicked on or kind of did an identify on any site address, it would show me related entrance points, right?
That's right. So in the pop-up here, I identified that site address, and I can see that it's related to entrance points, and I can find that related entrance point.
Yep.
And I can flash that on the map. And if I had multiple entrance points, they would show up all related here.
Okay. Ryan had some questions about how they might localize this in Canada. So he had a question about bilingual names and how might we handle that in the road name table, or maybe even with the road name aliases. So there's probably, Ryan, a couple different ways you could do that. You could look at extending the master street name table to account for that. That's definitely one approach, and some of those additional fields you talked about. And then you could also look at potentially using the alias for those multilingual if you wanted to. So it probably depends like how that data is used in practice, but there's a couple options for you. I know we've worked with several US cities that have similar, like they have French names for some of their English speaking roads, and they're using that kind of related road name or related road name alias table for that.
And I think that, one thing that comes to mind, if you did go that route of modifying the master street name to have an additional field for the other language name of that road, is I would add that additional field to my site address and road center lines. Okay. And when I selected the road name from that domain, I could run an attribute rule that would fire, that would go and look up in the master street name table, find that road name, find the other language road name, and return it and update that field. So you would have that dynamic nature as you're editing to enforce that integrity.
Yeah, that'd be really good. The other thing he asked about is, can you kind of Chris, you showed kind of the master street name updates in one integrated workflow. Like I got the new road names, I added the new roads, and then did the site addresses. But in theory, you may have someone else in your department who's responsible for the master street name table and then the the mapping technicians do the actual feature edits, there's no reason why they couldn't separate that, right? As long as they just keep the street index name in sync.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
you could
you could
imagine.
imagine. Yeah, you could imagine that this task potentially could be broken up into just updating the master street name table and updating the index, and then you have your mapping technicians that are just adding the new roads.
Yep. Sure. Okay.
I think too, just to kind of hit on like making it useful for a different country. One of the major differences is zip code versus postal code.
Yeah.
And that's another place that I would address that specifically for Canada, but also relevant to other countries as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lindsay. Okay, let's keep going. So one of the questions we had, Chris, and you kind of hit on this a little bit, is like adapting. So we obviously have a set of address layers that come with the solution. They have specific fields. Those fields were really kind of founded in some of the requirements we found in the national guidelines. But what if I have additional information? Can I modify the attribute rules to account for that? Or maybe I want to use the attribute rules in the map with a different schema. How might I go through that at a high level?
Yeah, definitely. If you just need to capture additional information, adding new fields to the layers is no problem. That's not going to have any impact, and the rules will still run to do that. If, for example, you want that additional field to be one of the things that's concatenated to calculate the full road name value, you would need to modify the attribute rule to look for that field and do that. And we tried in the attribute rules as well as we could, was to document how you would do that and what the different aspects are. So in that example, if I go to design and attribute rules, if I open up this rule, at the top, we try to put in the different parameters. So specify the fields that you want to concatenate, and you specify them in the order that you want them to concatenate. So if I added a new field called my test field, I would add that in this list, and it would be concatenated as part of the full road name. So some of them, when possible, we put the variables at the top to allow you to customize. But there are other things that aren't as easy to modify in that way. So it would just kind of depend on the different scenarios, but you can customize and modify the rules to meet your schema.
Okay. There's a couple questions on migrating content into the layers and maybe even creating content from scratch. Chris talked a little bit about the tasks we've set up to help you configure the solution to meet your specific needs. And one of those tasks exposes the Append tool that you can use to load content into the solution. So I would just, after you deploy the solution in your organization, I would take a closer look at those configuration tasks and walk through that. Obviously, it's hard for us to say what's the level of effort to migrate your content into the solution because we don't really have a clear understanding of what your source content looks like. But if you do have any questions when you do deploy the solution, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'll try to get you the help. We're also thinking about some additional enablement material that may make that easier, but ultimately, I think once you dig into the layers, you'll see they're pretty straightforward. There's centerlines, there's site addresses, they've got attributes associated with them. The master street name table is really important because that's where all the road name elements are stored. And then you just have full road name on the features. So there's some kind of fundamental design principles in that model, but dig in, take a look at the schema, take a look at the data dictionary, walk through the workflows that we provide in the tasks, and then certainly reach out to us if you have any questions.
And I'd also add that, this, as with all of our solutions, are fully supported by technical support as well.
Point.
So
yeah.
if you do have questions, you can always contact technical support as well.
Yeah, and there was also a question related, like, what if I don't have any of this data and I want to create it from scratch? There's no reason why you couldn't use this solution to do that. Obviously, you'd have to just have the source documents that you're going to use sitting next to you. So maybe we can talk more about the kind of specific workflows you're thinking about if you do, in fact, want to just create data from scratch.
Yep.
We had a really good question here, Chris. So is this going to be available through a web client, a web map? So I could maybe set up a distributed workflow that where cities and counties are all editing against a common set of layers. Maybe talk a little bit about the value that getting the capabilities we developed into attribute rules, what that presents now.
Yeah, so because now we have attribute rules that are being configured at the database tier rather than in the client like ArcMap, where Attribute Assistant would only run in ArcMap, attribute rules will run in the database regardless of what client is executing against them or where you're editing. So if I use ArcGIS Enterprise and I publish those as enterprise services, and then I edit them in a web client, the attribute rules will fire and it will do the same things that I see in Pro. There are still some things that aren't quite there in the web clients in terms of things refreshing immediately to show you those edits, but they are all occurring in the database. And so you could set up that environment if you manage them in an enterprise and you share them out as services that you could consume those in web clients. And we're always thinking about, we see a lot of value in that moving forward, and we're also thinking about how this solution evolves to give you some of those options, those pre-configured web apps to do some of those editing workflows in the web as well.
Okay. So a couple questions. We got quite a few. I'm just trying to summarize them here. You hit on how you can load content into an enterprise geodatabase. So obviously if you did that, it would support a versioned environment. Mm-hmm. There was a question about how the road name, the road index worked, and just what would happen, Chris, if people were editing features at the same time you ran that update for the road name? Would everything be okay there?
So it does to run that tool, then to modify the domain. If I'm in a non-versioned environment, I need all edits to be saved. So I can't have any transactions that are pending. Otherwise, I get a schema error because I am modifying the domain. Sure. So that is one thing that I walk through the task, that all edits have to be saved before you can update that domain index.
Gotcha. Yep. Then we had some questions. I'm just summarizing a little bit, you guys. We had some questions about what we talked at the beginning of the meetup about how this will be available with Pro 2.5, but talk a little bit, Chris, about the license level required of Pro to use it.
Yep. So you're gonna need standard, where we have some advanced editing capabilities that require standard and some of the tools. So that's the license level required at Pro.
Any extensions?
Yes, for Data Reviewer. Data Reviewer now at ArcGIS Pro is automatically installed and it's automatically available, but you do need a license for the Data Reviewer portion of the solution. But if you don't need to run those checks and you don't need that capabilities, you don't need the extension. So it's not a requirement for the solution, but if you want to run the Data Reviewer checks, you need that license.
So then a couple questions about the rules. So there was one question about have we accounted for all the rules that we previously had in the ArcMap, all the behavior and all the rules that were in the previous ArcMap solution? And the answer is yes. The only thing I'll point out is that we did separate the facility data management aspect of the ArcMap solution from this offering. But there's no reason why you couldn't, if you wanted to manage that in an integrated environment, you could do that. You could add your facility layers into the address data management solution and do the intersect features to populate place names and things like that. We just didn't feel it was necessary to be so tightly coupled this time around. And I think there was a question related to populating populating parcel IDs and parcel information at the same time. And you could use those intersect feature rules to do the same thing, right, Chris? To populate additional attributes that you might have added.
That's right. Yeah, you just ultimately you need everything in the same database. So you need your addresses to be in the same database as your parcels, and you can go out and find the parcels that it intersects with and return the PIN, for example.
The other question, I'll just hit the last couple and then we turn to Mike. We're going to run a little long today, you guys. Thanks for all the questions. So there was a question about why do we have postal addresses related to site addresses, and I think the important thing to point out there is we wanted to support the clear separation of site address and its related mailing address. So if you only create site addresses and then you ship that information to the Postal Service and then they create the authoritative mailing addresses, that's fine, but ultimately you'll want that authoritative mailing information back in your address repository so you can assign it to assessment change notices, water and sewer billing, right? If not, you'll have a whole bunch of diverse data sets there. So the goal here was to help you build that authoritative repository and then manage that information and then be able to push it to the business systems that require it. So we wanted to clearly differentiate between the site address or service address and the related mailing address. So I think let's let Mike go, and then we'll come back and try to answer some of these questions as we have time too, Chris.
Great.
Okay.
All right, I'll stop sharing.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right, thanks, Scott. I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
All right, we're going to give Chris a little break while we take a look at the address field operations solution. Address field operations is a collection of companion apps that extend your address data management workflows into the field. The first solution I want to show you is address crowdsourcing, which is a configuration of Survey 123 for ArcGIS that can be used by addressing authorities to enlist internal resources, other engaged agencies, or even the public to collect missing address information. So site address information can be submitted by filling out this simple form, which is accessible by a mobile device, laptop, or anywhere a browser can be accessed. So I'm going to go ahead and start populating this form. One capability of Survey 123 that we've configured into address crowdsourcing is the ability to progressively display fields. So if I choose to populate a building unit type here, and we've got a long list of types there, I'll be presented with an alternate building unit type. And in a similar way, if I choose to populate a unit number, say something like an apartment number, I'll see an alternate unit number field available. That continues for a few stacks deep, although they're not required. In this case, we're going to leave them blank. The address is in Naperville. I can provide some comments, and then I'm going to use the embedded map to go straight to the address. So I'm okay with that location. I'm going to provide my contact information. And submit. So I can then use other components of the address field operation solutions to view submitted addresses, decide if they require field investigation, verify an address in the field, and ultimately incorporate the proposed site address into my authoritative data. So after an address has been submitted, I can view it using address assignments, which is a configuration of workforce for ArcGIS that I can use to create and manage address-related field assignments. So there's the new proposed site address that just came in. When I use address crowdsourcing, I'm populating a proposed site address feature service, a hosted feature service that's been added here to the workforce project. I've also added a published version of my authoritative addresses so that I can quickly visually compare my proposed site addresses as sourced through address crowdsourcing and my authoritative data. So I'm going to use these proposed site addresses here along Briargate to drive some address assignments. So I can use those existing features, select all of them, and create an assignment. In this case, I'm going to create a verify address assignment because I want to dispatch field workers to go into the field and verify those addresses. I can assign it to a field resource, set a priority level and other details, maybe provide a description, and create those assignments. I also see that I have missing addresses here on Royal Bombay Court. So I also want to create an assignment to collect new addresses. And again, I can assign it to field staff, set a priority level, and maybe provide a description that says collect all addresses on the street. We're using some capabilities to integrate workforce and collector. And when I collect this new site address, I'm going to be populating the same proposed site address feature service that my address crowdsourcing survey is. So whereas when I'm verifying an address, I'm editing data that has been collected through address crowdsourcing, I can also collect new addresses, and we'll see that in just a second. But we're passing the location field into the place name field of this proposed site address layer, which has ultimately the same schema as the site address points you've seen Chris show. So if I knew that I was going to have a field worker canvass an entire area, I might just decide to pass a more proper place name into the place name field. So I can create that assignment as well. So as a field worker, I can then use the Workforce mobile app to view the assignments that have been assigned to me. In this case, I have several, both to collect new addresses and to verify addresses. I can view those on a map, select them, and then manage my field activities and the assignment status. I'm then going to move over to Address Field Inventory, which is a configuration of collector for ArcGIS. Here I can edit the information through address that I collected through address crowdsourcing, reposition the site address point if I want, and ultimately flag the address as verified. Because I know I have a collect new address assignment as well there on Royal Bombay Court, I can begin to collect new site address points that will automatically come through as verified because I'm in the field collecting that information, populate the appropriate attribute data, and submit that as well. When I'm finished with all of my address field assignments, I can go back to the Workforce app and complete my assignments. So we used address field operations. We used the address field operations solution to crowdsource addresses, assign field work to verify and collect new addresses, and to complete and track that field work itself. So I'm going to hand it back over to Chris so he can show you how to incorporate those field verified addresses into our authoritative data.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, here I am back in the Address Data Management Pro project. I've brought in that proposed site address layer that Mike was just showing. So I've had some field staff go out and verify the addresses, these addresses along Royal State George Drive. So I want to incorporate those back into my authoritative site address layer. So it's really as easy as we're going to draw a little lasso selection around these points. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, and then I'm going to paste Special into my site addresses layer, and I want to keep all the source attributes. Now I'm going to turn this proposed site address layer up. So I've created those site address points. If I look at their attributes, I can go ahead and update some characteristics for them all. So if I needed to update the state or the municipality, I could do that, or any of the values. I'm going to go ahead and just update their status from pending to current and hit apply. And so now I can save my changes, clear my selection, and now those addresses have been incorporated into my authoritative site address layer. For those proposed site addresses, I might then want to go ahead and select them. And I'm going to indicate that they've already been verified, but I'm going to indicate that they've been incorporated. And by doing that, now these addresses will no longer, well, this is a new feature for people who are interested in 2.5. You can now undo and redo edits on hosted feature layers. That's a nice feature at 2.5. But so now what happens when I mark these up as incorporated, they'll no longer show in the field app or the workforce project. So they've they've gone through the full process, they've come in the system, they've been verified, they've been included in the authoritative site address layer, and now I'm closing them out from the field operations apps. So with that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to turn it back over to Scott.
Okay, Chris, let me share my screen. I think we are getting near the end. We just got some questions left maybe we could hit. Before we do that though, I do want to encourage everyone to complete the survey that we'll send out after. It would be really important for us to get feedback from you on this solution and the format of the meetup as a whole, because we use that to ultimately impact future topics that we do. So let's go through, Matt, maybe you can help us kind of curate what other questions may have came in. And I'm gonna look at the chat, or you look at the chat, I'll look at the Q&A maybe, and we'll just kind
Yeah, I think we got most of the chat. I've been kind of taking note of that. I think we did a good job there. There's a couple questions in the Q&A panel that are very similar about building locators. So are there plans to create a locator task to help with creating a custom locator? So from the information you create within the solution. And then similarly, can you then build a locator that's returning pretty much the unique site addresses that you're creating within that?
Yeah, so I think, I don't know that we'll add a task necessarily for creating the locator, but in the ArcMap version, we do have a help topic that walks people through how to do that. Most of that is documented in the core product help. So let us take a look at that and see, and maybe we'll add some references on the solution side if necessary.
I think the other thing I would add is we do have plans. We have a community addresses program that one of the kind of main drivers is to get that authoritative information from communities and build a common addressing layer that can support our locators. And we want to develop a tool that makes it easy for you to push this data or publish this data in that format so that you can share it out as part of the community addresses program. That could be also part of helping you, assisting you building that locator as well.
Yeah, that's good. Chris, this may be a tough question to ask without knowing kind of the data structure in which people deploy it, but we had a question about, can I separate, like how might the permissions work if I want one organization to maintain the site addresses and another organization to maintain postal addresses? They are related features, right? I'm assuming the permissions at some level would need to be consistent. Probably.
I think you could do that. You could do that through enterprise and services architecture, where you publish out a service of the postal address that's separate from the site address points, and you only share that postal address service with the people who should have permissions to edit that service, and the people who can edit the site addresses see that service. So that's one way that you could do it. You can also do it at the database tier as well. You can set permissions on what tables people have access to as well. The challenge is the related aspect, because to add the new postal address, you have to know the ID of the site address that it's supposed to be associated with. So I don't know. We'd have to think about that a little bit more of how you could implement that.
Yeah. Because I'd have to, either way, I'd have to be able to access the site addresses.
Yeah, you'd have to know the ID so that you could create the postal address associated with the right site address ID. But maybe you could, as part of the services architecture, you could publish out the site addresses and not make them editable, but make them view only, and suppress the fields that you don't want people to see other than the site address ID and the address number or something like that.
Yep. We mentioned this earlier too. There's another question that came in about when will 2.5 be available? Late January 2020, and we'll ship the solution with that. There's another question about the schema for the site addresses. Is it similar to community maps? It's very similar. There's actually more content, but we have been working with the community addresses team to sync up the layers so you can publish to that format if you want to. I don't know that you need to create an intermediate layer, but you could just do a simple ETL process to write to it. And as Chris mentioned, we're talking about in a future release delivering a tool that would make that easier for you.
And I think the key thing to take away from that is, we had to build a standard that would take advantage or would support many workflows for leveraging address information. The community address program is one aspect of that, you know, routing people to the right location, but it's not everything that you need to manage associated with your address information. So we can't just use their specification because we have all these other workflows we need to support.
Okay. Are there any more questions coming in from the group? I know we're a few minutes over. We'll kind of give everyone one last chance to get their questions in. Chris, we had a question about resetting attribute defaults on the fly. Like how does that work with the feature templates? Is there an override?
So, so there's a couple things. I wasn't quite sure what that question was about, but you know, if it's in terms of setting default values when you create features, you can do that through the feature templates. When we create the site address point as part of the site address construction tool, if you define any defaults on the feature class for the site address point, those defaults will be applied when that feature is created. So if you want to default the county name or the city name or the state name, you can set those as defaults at the feature class level, and that will be honored when the feature is created.
Okay. Any other questions before we call it a meetup?
I think we got them all.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for all the great questions. Hopefully you're as excited as we are about the new address solutions. As we mentioned a few times today, our plan is to ship them with ArcGIS Pro 2.5 in late January 2020. Certainly, if you have any feedback between now and then, we'd be glad to hear from you. Either contact us via the meetup site or shoot us an email directly if you have our contact info. And once you do get your hands on it in late January, we'd love to get your feedback and love to hear more from you. So thanks a lot for your time today. And Matt, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. So I posted links to where we post our video recordings of every meetup. So it goes to the meetup site. They link off to YouTube. We usually post those about 1 week after the meetup date. So look for that. Look to these sites that I posted here. We really appreciate you guys joining us. This is our last meetup of the year. We're going to be scheduling our new meetups coming in 2020. So after the holidays, we'll be scheduling those. If you have any suggestions on topics, please feel free to reach out to us on the meetup site. You can email our team there. We'd love to hear any kind of feedback, and we'll be setting those up soon. So look forward to that. And with that being said, go ahead and end the meetup, and I appreciate everyone's time today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great holiday.